你帮我 share 吗？Welcome to the Small Business Show. My name is Swire from Garuda Promo. Today, I'm happy to have Lynne-Anne McGrail, a certified End of Life Doula and consultant, to be on the show. Good morning, Lynne-Anne.
Good morning, Swire. Thank you so much for having me.
I wanted to, just tell viewer that, Lynne-Anne, you're one of the my favorite motivational speaker that I know. I've listened to you talk for a few times, and always engaging. You have the energy that draw me in. I'm usually a very short expensive spend, but every time that you speak, I feel I'm fully 100% committed in listening.
Well, thank you so much for that. That makes me feel good. It means a lot coming from you, Swire. Thank you.
Yeah. So please tell the viewer a little bit about what you do, and I tell you a quick story. I'm having dinner with my son yesterday, and then we talked about what I'm going to do today, who I'm going to interview today. I said, End of Life Doula, and then his eye went really big like this, and he never tuned in for the show, and he said he's going to tune in and find out more about what you do. And with that said, please tell us, what you do and your role as a End of Life Doula.
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to just explain that we have a company my husband and I do called A Better You. And within that company, we provide clinical hypnotherapy services, life coaching services, and now we have a division called A Peaceful Transition for the End of Life Doula services. And that's where I come in. So I always try to explain an end of life doula, kind of comparing it with a birthing doula. Like, people have heard of a birthing doula, right? So the word doula really means, it's a Greek letter that means giving physical, emotional, and spiritual support to another individual. And so when you take the meaning of that and apply it to the end of life, an end of life doula is a non-medical professional that provides holistic support for the dying and their loved ones before, during, and after death. And we're trained in various ends of life stages. And as a doula, I'm able to assist the family with the understanding that dying is a natural process while still providing comfort and support. So what do I mean by comfort and support? So when people think of death, like, death is the number 2 fear in America. Do you know what the number 1 fear in America is, Swire?
What is it?
No, it's public speaking is the number 1 fear.
Wow.
So
really?
Jerry Seinfeld has an episode that says, "So you mean to tell me you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy?" And that just shows the depth of fear that we have around death. And so as an end of life doula, I'm meeting the family and the individuals where they are in their fear. I'm hearing them out. I'm actively listening to what it is their needs are. What are their concerns? What are they afraid of? What do they, seriously, how do they need to be supported? And sometimes it's just a matter of just listening. Sometimes it's helping them plan a vigil. Sometimes it's doing a legacy project. Sometimes it's simply being with the person. Now, when I say with the person that I work most closely with is the person who's been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And not just that person, but their caregiver. So oftentimes pre-COVID, I was going in and sitting with the individual who was diagnosed terminally ill to give the caregiver a break, because it's a lot of work caring for someone who's getting toward end of life. And there's a high burnout rate. They call it compassion fatigue, where the caregivers, with this person 24/7. So I can kind of come in and give that person a break. And then when I say I'm trained in various types of end of life stages, what I mean by that is, if I'm working with a person who has, say, for example, COPD, right? chronic obstruction pulmonary disease, which they're terminally going to be dying from, their symptoms toward the end of life are going to be different than a person who has, like, say, for example, pancreatic cancer.
Mhm.
And so I'm trained in all those stages with all these different types of diagnoses. And so I can prepare the family what might be coming up next. So what comes up next for a pancreatic cancer patient will be, sometimes they get really bloated in the belly. And sometimes we need to drain the fluid out of that belly. And what does that look like? So educating and advocating for the family in that way. So that way, you know how they say knowledge is power. So if you feel like you have a little bit of knowledge about what's coming next, then you can get a sense of control in a situation that completely feels out of control. And so let me get back to your question. How did I get involved with this? Like, what steered me to become an end of life doula? And I'll be honest with you, I had never heard of an end of life doula a year ago. I didn't even know they existed.
Mhm.
And what happened was I had a lot of family members, not a lot, but my dad passed away, and then my niece, who was 32, passed away. So getting hands-on experience about what it feels like to be with someone that you love and having them in the process of transitioning. And when I was with my niece, something really odd came over me. And it was that sense that a groundedness and a connection as I sat with her body. She was in a sleep coma and she was getting ready to make her transition. And the sense of calm that came to me as I sat with her was indescribable. And I just got this knowing that she's going to a better place, that she's not really dying, that she's going to always be here in my heart. And then when she did pass, I turned around and she was surrounded by her family and friends and her boyfriend and loved ones. Being able to just be fully present with them, asking, "Are you okay? Can I get you anything? What do you need?" And I was sharing about this with a friend of mine, and she said, "Well, you sound like you're doing an end of life doula stuff." And I'm like, "What?" So that's how I found out about it about a year ago. So, of course, I Googled it, and there's a plethora of information out there, and found a course that's through the Doula Givers International. It's run by a hospice nurse by the name of Suzanne O'Brien. She's a wonderful teacher. It's an online program, self-paced, but you have a lot of real-time interaction with her and the other students. So if anybody's interested in this line of work, Doula Givers International is the way to go. So that's how I got into it.
So you answered the question how, but then like my follow-up question will be, it seems like to me, you obviously have you're very positive and you always have a lot of energy surrounding you. But then by consulting and helping your client, does it make you sad? Or obviously at the ultimate goal for your client is to move on to a better place. But then do you need to reset, or do you get stressed or depressed after you help your client?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because when I am with a patient or a loved one, like my own, I do have two patients that I'm working with now. I I am in such a centered place. So it's as if I am just a neutral observer holding space for that person. And it's not really all of me and my energy. It's I'm sitting there, I'm opening up to spirit, if you will, if we can get a little woo-woo here, and having the universal divine energy sort of hold me in a place of neutral observer to hold space for that person. So where it is sad, especially for the individuals who are witnessing their loved one, transitioning, it's a very natural process of life. And so to embrace it as such, to know that we're all going to die. I mean, it's a given. It's 100% guarantee. Haven't met anybody yet that's not going to die. So how we how we can approach death and how we think about death makes a difference in how we accept death. And so for me, I know that we don't actually die. I mean, we die in our body, but I know that more of part of the higher part of us continues. And so that's kind of what keeps me going, and that's what I hold on to. Sure, every once in a while you get a situation that is super sad, that it's a child, it's somebody who went really really quickly, got a diagnosis, and then within a week they're gone. it absolutely can be heavy. And so there's a balance. So I do part-time end-of-life doula work, and then I do part-time doula consultant work. And that's how I create that balance to keep myself in check, because it can get heavy. And it's important to do self-nurturing care for myself so that I don't get burnt out while I'm helping others through their thing.
Yeah, I do agree. Spiritually, we do live on, and for people who are at really good or really bad, people remember you for 1,000 years. So like even long before you pass, if you're on the very end of the spectrum, people write books about you. But when we were talking off the camera before we go live, and you told me that it doesn't necessarily has to be terminal illness, or at the end of your life, your conversation can actually be for younger generation. And then for the, you also broadened my horizon, said, it could be a fun planning process. I've met, a funeral home director. He kind of let me know that he helped a client when he was cremated. He actually found a company in Europe. He put all his ashes into a rhino record. He has a 50 limited print that he sent it to people. So that's his life work, last song that he made, and 50 records. There you go. Can you tell us more about like how the planning could start even when you're younger?
Exactly. So, in fact, just yesterday in the New York Times, Sunday New York Times paper, there was an article about how COVID is really bringing the concept of end of life to our consciousness. So, and it's interesting how you mentioned the younger generation, because in that article, this woman actually wrote, she is 21 years old, and I'll quote what she says here. End of life decisions can be overwhelming, but making those choices when she's healthy gave her more control, knowing that she would ease the burden on her family if the worst happened also gave her peace of mind. It would be easier for people around me to know what I want, she said. And so that's what planning for end of life is about. It's about peace of mind. So because there are so many people that have that fear of death, they don't talk about it. Like, in my generation, it was like, oh, you don't talk about it. It's taboo. You just kind of wait till it happens and then you deal with it, right? And the up and coming generation, especially this millennial generation, are about, well, wait a second. I have control over how my end of life can look now. Well, let me do that. Let me jump on a program and fill out these forms and let my loved ones know that, yeah, I think I'd rather be cremated, or I would definitely want to be at home when I'm at the end of life if I have a choice. And so part of what I do is go out into the community and educate people, like, let's plan now. Let's have an opportunity to do it now. And then what happens is, as you do that, as you fill out your advance directives, as you get your healthcare proxy, as you get your living wills, and you actually do those things, like most of us think about those things and they're always back here in the back burner. But then when you actually do them, oh my goodness, it feels like 1,000-pound brick is released out of your backpack, and you feel lighter, and like life seems easier. And now you can really start living fully because you have a plan. And those that don't have a plan and they wait to the very last minute are trying to make these really, really tough decisions at the 11th hour in crisis mode. What do they want to be cremated? Do they want to be kept on a machine if the machine is going to be keeping them alive? What are their wishes for end of life? And so I have a lot of information around that. I have forms to help people fill out. I'm actually creating a workshop called the Peace of Mind Planner it's a 4-part workshop that goes into preparing mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially to get ready now so that we can start truly living in the moment for today. So
Okay.
Thanks for asking for that.
We have a question in from a viewer. It's actually my question too. Like, it's such a sensitive topic, and as you know, like you just said, a lot of taboo by even talking about it. As a marketing person, I do want to know how you market your business. How do you get the word out, and even begins this somewhat difficult conversation? is how do you find
Mhm.
new clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it's interesting because if you go to someone, oh, are you dying? I know somebody you can see. No, you're not going to do
Yeah, how
that.
do you make sales
It's a
calls?
very yes, exactly. It's very intimate. It's very personal, and it's very sacred. It's a sacred time. And so, for people who I know, like friends and families that have a loved one that's been diagnosed, they'll call me and just say, hey, how can I better support my person? Like I just had a classmate call me and ask me, her neighbor is dying and that person doesn't have any family members. She's asking me how she can better support him. And so I'm offering suggestions in that way. It's kind of like a resource place for me. And that's about just giving back to the community. I mean, that I don't charge for that. It doesn't, I don't mind doing that at all. In fact, that's what I want to do, is help people support other people. But most of the places I'm pitching and really getting the name End of Life Doula out there, because so few people know what we do, is
Mhm.
really about connecting with hospice. It's connecting with people who run senior centers, assisted living centers, attorneys that work with elder care law. And so meeting with them and explaining what it is that I do, they will have more of an opportunity to be confronted with somebody who is at end of life than, say, you know, yourself or someone who doesn't work in that field. And so part of the process of doing that is I've created a PowerPoint. I've got connections with one particular hospice who I had to work with as a volunteer in order for me to get certified as an end of life doula. And it's the Agape Hospice in Torrance, not affiliated with Agape Spiritual Center for those that are here in LA, that they're not associated together. But with that particular hospice, I've gone in, I've done my pitch, and they have me on their books for being able to provide end of life services. Now, I want to just do one caveat. We do work hand in hand with hospice. So I'm working with the family, the hospice is working with the family. And the hospice, for those that don't know what hospice is, it's an organization that provides end of life services. They provide medical equipment, they provide medications to make sure the person's comfortable. They provide chaplain services, social worker services. And as an end of life doula, we don't touch medication, we don't provide equipment. Um, we provide time. And so that's the difference between what hospice does and an end of life doula, is that hospice can only go in there 1 to 2 hours a week with their patients. And that's the number one complaint from people who use hospice, was that they don't spend enough time with us. We need more time with them. We need to have someone sit with us, or just, console us, or ask more about what our needs are. And that's where an end of life doula comes in and kind of closes that gap and allows that family to get the support that they're really seeking. And so out there educating people about what our services is a key component. And most of the time it's through hospice.
Wow. You got me thinking a lot because, obviously when you give the examples, when you do like estate planning, when you do elder law, it's kind of like when you do your financial planning. Some people don't want to talk about it, but then you got to plan it, for whatever that comes in mind. So, this is, I would think, part of the planning that you have to do, because again, we all gonna die, and you rather have someone who have experience and plan for other people to help you, or when it ultimately happened, then you know it's going to be emotional, it's going to be overwhelming, when one of your loved ones will die. So but if you have a plan in place, you're actually helping your loved ones to know exactly what to do. So maybe walk us through the process. Do you have like a document, or is it like online? Like when it ultimately happened, do you have a process so the loved one would know exactly what to do as the wishes for your client?
Hmm. Well, that's what an advanced care directive is. I mean, for me personally, I put off doing an advanced care directive for two reasons. Two, if I did it, maybe that means I'm going to die soon. And the second reason was we don't have children. So I thought, well, I'll just leave everything to charity and be done with it. And then the truth of the matter is, I really want someone to know that if something happens to me, I'm only kept alive by machines. That to me is not quality of life. So we talk about what quality of life means to you, and then you plan accordingly. So if you are the person that says, hey, I definitely want to be kept on machines for as long as possible, even if that means I'm on that machine for years because it's keeping me alive, then that is that person's choice. But you have to have that in writing. Otherwise, people know. And so yes, it can feel uncomfortable, but when you look at it from a place of being prepared, like when you're going to study for an exam, you're just not going to take the exam without preparing for it, right? So this is kind of like we're going to prepare, and then when when the time comes to take that exam, to make that transition, everyone in our lives will be prepared for it, and they'll know what it looks like. So I do a lot of, like I said, resourcing. And there's one that I really would like to put out there for people who want to, like, how do you start to have the conversation to begin with, right? Like,
Yeah.
excuse me, honey, I think it's time to talk about us dying, and it can be really awkward and uncomfortable. There's a website called the Conversation Project. It's theconversationproject.org. And on there, they actually have a format, if you will, of questions that you can ask in such a way that feels loving and kind and compassionate. And to know that when you're talking about these things, doesn't mean it's going to bring it on. It doesn't mean that death is going to come just because you're talking about it. That would be like, if you're talking about sex, you think you're going to get pregnant. No, that's not going to happen, right? So talking about death doesn't mean you're going to die. So having that form filled out ahead of time and understanding what your biases are with death, are you comfortable talking about death, and getting those reasons out on paper why you're not comfortable. So that's the first step, is getting to your own fears, getting to your own mental blocks and your own beliefs around death. Then you can start talking with somebody else about what it is that you would like for your own death. So it's a process that starts off slow, and it just allows a person to first understand that by doing this, it truly is taking weight off of our shoulders on an unconscious level, because we know that we're going to die, and we know that by preparing for it will help us, but just getting started is the hard part. And so I offer anybody who wants to have a consultation with me, I can steer them in the right direction or guide them through the process individually.
Okay, let me put your website up there. So for viewer who's interested in, contact Lynne-Anne, tell us more about your consultation process. Obviously, with COVID, people don't want to go out yet. So what have you been doing? And really, how would they know that they need to start the conversation? Are there certain things that prompt them to do that? What will be something, maybe do they have to experience a life-changing event, or they experience someone dying, thinking that they need to do something better for them? Like, how would you encourage them to think about it before they reach out to you?
Well, what's interesting about COVID is that it kind of brought death to the table, for those that didn't really want to talk about it, that all of a sudden now it's here. And yes, if someone close to you has passed, a loved one has passed, even a celebrity, if they've passed, it's like it brings the concept of death to our consciousness, and we're given an opportunity to sit down and look at it, or we can continue to ignore it and pretend it's not there. And I think with COVID, it has, for me, it's offered me a different kind of opportunity. Obviously, I'm not going in and seeing clients in person anymore, which is unfortunate, but I am working with them on the phone still. And we do Zoom, not quite as much with the person who's sick, because talking and trying to stare at a screen when you don't feel good is exhausting work. So I do most of my work now with the caregiver and with the family members that are caring for that individual. And so if a person wants to get prepared, like have a consult, how do you do it? How does it start? You realize that, okay, now is the time I would like to plan something. Then you would have a conversation with me, and we would talk about, okay, where are you mentally with getting ready? Do you have an idea of what it is that you would like to have happen? Do you know if you want to be cremated? Do you want to have a regular service, memorial service? Do you, there's companies now that will take your ashes and make diamonds out of them, or you could take your ashes and plant them by trees and have the tree, your loved one become the tree. I mean, there's so many, quite frankly, creative ways to keep ourselves present here on the earthly plane by these other venues, but people just don't know about it. And so part of my job and part of the collective End of Life Doula Alliance, which we have formed a chapter here in LA, is to get out there and talk to people like you, Swire, to educate people that we're here. It's okay to start talking about it now. And if there's trepidation or you don't feel comfortable talking about it, then it's a phone call with me, free consultation for as long as you need to chat with me about it. And then we set up a time to actually go through the paperwork together. Like I mentioned before, that conversation project is a great way to start. And that it starts with a conversation, first with yourself and then with your loved ones. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. It's such a difficult topic, and you put it in a way that's perfectly explained. And, it's nice to talk about it, and then if you have someone to guide you, especially for something in life and death, and I do see you're taking a lot off from the family or the loved one, so now they kind of have a plan. Even its ultimate goal is death, but then if you plan for it, so maybe they will have a different outcome, than if they just do nothing, and then when it happens, and you get overwhelmed by everything. So thank you so much, Lynne-Anne, for coming on to the show. I think you brought a lot of energy into this new profession that you do. And if viewers wanted to like the show and would you want to see more, connect with us on social media. And thank you so much again for coming on today, Lynne-Anne.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you and the viewers about this new movement. And I really appreciate all that you're doing, Swire, and just bringing people on board your show, the small business show. And I think it's great. I just love how you're booming with that, and lots of light to it being more and more successful for you. So thank you again for having me.
All right, thank you. Take care.